For this piece, I'll be making a painted paper collage of the Yaupon Holly shrub, which is the only caffeinated plant that's native to the southeastern United States. I will also be reading from two books that are hosted on Project Gutenberg, which is an online library of books that are in the public domain, available to freely share, certainly within the United States and most of the rest of the world. The first reading is from a book called Trees You Want to Know by Donald Colross Peaty. Its original copyright was from 1934, so bear that in mind with the information presented. The preface begins, "Every American wants to have at least a speaking acquaintance with the trees that make up our great national heritage, the unequaled forests of North America. The camper, the tramper, the woodsman, the gardener, the motorist, and the inquisitive school girl and boy all wish to know the names, the uses, and the ranges of our native trees. There are more than 400 tree species in North America, north of Mexico, and in so small a book it is impossible to include all. Species from every section of the country have been selected so that this little book is as serviceable near San Francisco as near New York, in Alaska as in Georgia, and throughout Canada." And then we move on to Yaupon Holly. It is a pretty little evergreen tree, very like holly, the leaf margins toothed but never spiny. Related to the Paraguay tea, yerba mate, its leaves, when boiled, yield a tea more valuable medicinally than pleasant to drink, though Indians used to travel far to obtain it. Gulf states, north to Arkansas, and along the coast to South Virginia. The next reading is from a book called Plant Lore, Legends, and Lyrics, embracing the myths, traditions, superstitions, and folklore of the plant kingdom, by Richard Fulkerd, Jr., and its copyright date was 1884. Now, these mentions of holly are likely not regarding Yaupon holly, but they do belong to the same family, have similar characteristics, and are interesting and fun to think about. Holly is first mentioned in a section about wreaths and garlands. It is not too much to say that Greeks and Romans employed garlands, wreaths, and festoons of flowers on every possible occasion. They adorned with them the sacrificial victims, the statue of the god to whom sacrifice was offered, and the priest who performed the rite. They placed chaplets on the brows of the dead and strewed their graves with floral wreaths, whilst at their funeral feasts of the parents of the departed one encircled their heads with floral crowns. They threw them to the successful actors on the stage. They hung with garlands the gates of their cities on days of rejoicing. They employed floral wreaths at their nuptials. Nearly all the plants composing these wreaths had a symbolic meaning, and they were varied according to the seasons and the circumstances of the wearer. The hawthorn adorned Grecian brides, but the bridal wreath of the Romans was usually composed of verbena, plucked by the bride herself. Holly wreaths were sent as tokens of good wishes. Chaplets of parsley and rue were worn to keep off evil spirits. In another section, holly is mentioned as a plant of the Christian Church. In commemoration of the infant Savior having laid on a manger, it is customary in some parts of Italy to deck mangers at Christmas time with moss, sow thistle, cypress, and prickly holly. In old church calendars, Christmas Eve is marked Templa Extornatur, churches are decked. Herrick, in the time of Charles I, thus combines a number of these old customs connected with the decoration of churches. Down with rosemary and bays, down with the mistletoe, instead of holly now upraise the greener box for show. The holly hitherto did sway, let box now domineer, until the dancing Easter day, or Easter's eve appear. At Christmastide, holly, the holy tree, rosemary, laurel, bay, arborvitae, and ivy are hung up in churches, and are suitable also for the decoration of houses, with the important addition of mistletoe. Ivy should only be placed in outer passages or doorways. Holly can also be found in a section called Plants of the Witches. A spell called the Witch's Chain is here described as being performed by 3 young women who could provide the necessary holly, juniper, and mistletoe berries with an acorn for the end of each link, and the witch would instruct them how to wind this mystic chain around a thin log of wood, which was to be placed on the fire, accompanied by many magical rites, the secret of which she would divulge, and then burnt, with the promised result that just as the last acorn was consumed, each of the three maidens should see her future husband walk across the room, or, if she were doomed to celibacy, then a coffin or some misshapen form. Here is holly listed in the glossary. From the use made of its branches in decorating churches at Christmas time, the monks, by an easy corruption, bestowed on the holly designation of the holy tree. The disciples of Zoroaster, or fire worshippers, believe that the holly tree casts no shadow, and both in Persia and India they employ an infusion of its leaves for several purposes connected with their religious observances. They also sprinkle the face of a newly born child with water impregnated with holly bark. If the holly, or holver tree, be planted about a house, it will keep away all malign spells and enchantments, and defend the house from lightning. He also, among other marvels, relates that the flowers of the holly would freeze water and would repel poison, and that if a staff of its wood were thrown to any animal, even if it did not touch him, it would so influence the animal as to cause him to lie down beside it. The custom of decorating houses and churches with holly at Christmas is probably derived from the Romans, who were wont to send boughs to their friends during the festival of Saturnalia, which occurred at about the same period. And the oaks being then bare of leaves, the priests obliged the people to bring in boughs of holly and evergreens. There is little doubt that the early Roman Christians, disregarding the Church's interdiction, introduced the heathen practice of decorating their houses with holly, and in course of time connected it with their own faith. There is an old English superstition that elves and fairies join the social gatherings at Christmas, and this led to branches being hung up in hall and bower in order that the fays may hang in each leaf and cling on every bough during that sacred time when spirits have no power to harm. This evergreen Christmas should be taken down on Candlemas Eve. Herrick says, "Down with the holly and ivy all, wherewith ye deck the Christmas hall, so that the superstitious find no one least branch there left behind. For look how many leaves there be, neglected there, maids tend to me, so many goblins ye shall see." De Gubernatis tells us that in certain parts of France, in Switzerland, at Bologna, and in other continental countries, there is an old custom extant of cutting branches of holly on Christmas Eve and hanging them in houses and stables in the hope of driving away evil spirits and witchcraft. As the holly leaf is prickly, it repulses and drives away enemies. An English medieval ballad illustrates this custom. "Here comes holly that is so gent, to please all men is his intent, alleluia. But lord and lady of this hall, whosoever against holly call, alleluia. Whosoever against holly do cry, in a leap shall he hang full high, alleluia. Whosoever against holly so sing, he may weep and hands wring, alleluia." In Germany, holly is Christdorn, the thorn woven into the crown placed on our Savior's head at the crucifixion. Witches are reputed to detest holly. In its name they see but another form of the word holy, and its thorny foliage and blood-red berries are suggestive of the most Christian associations. In Northumberland, holly is employed in a form of divination. There the prickly variety is called he-holly, and the smooth she-holly. It is the leaves of the latter only that are deemed proper for divining purposes. These smooth leaves must be plucked late on a Friday by persons careful to preserve an unbroken silence from the time they go out to the dawn of the following morn. The leaves must be collected in a 3-cornered handkerchief, and on being brought home, 9 of them must be selected, tied with 9 knots into the handkerchief, and placed beneath the pillow. Then, sleep being obtained, Dreams worthy of all credit will attend this rite. In another form of divination, a maiden places 3 pails of water on her bedroom floor, then pins to her nightdress opposite her heart 3 leaves of green holly, and so retires to rest. She will be aroused from her first sleep by 3 terrible yells, followed by 3 horse laughs, after which the form of her future husband will appear. If he is deeply attached to her, he will change the position of the water pails. If not, he will glide from the room without touching them. This spell is only effectual when performed on All Halloween, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, and Beltane or Midsummer's Eve. Holly is under the dominion of Saturn. So it's interesting to see from the different folklore how sometimes holly is associated with Romans, and sometimes it's associated with Christians, and sometimes it's associated with witches, and then it turns around and is associated with repelling witches from the Christian traditions. It's also interesting that we see the first mention of the smooth holly, which I suppose could be the Yaupon holly because it's not prickly, and how it's referred to as she holly, and how that is the one that's used for the divining purposes. So either way you look at it, this is a very interesting plant with a very long history of folklore and traditions, and a really cool way to maybe get some native caffeine if you're in the southern United States.